Well, hello and welcome to the Google Digital Garage. My name is Daryl and I'm a trainer for the free skills training program, the Google Digital Garage. A little bit about myself. I come from an incredibly diverse background within sales, recruitment, hospitality, learning and development, and of course within tech. But I dedicate the majority of my time to help close the digital skills gap that is so prevalent in our world today through amazing initiatives just like this one. And I have quite a lot of experience delivering presentations in many different sectors. So hopefully my experience will be portrayed through today's session. But I'm not here alone. We're very, very fortunate to have Tessa with us here today, who's also a Google Digital Garage trainer. And she can be located on the right-hand side if you're viewing us through a laptop or a desktop, and she'll have a little blue spanner next to her name. If you're viewing us through a mobile device, Tessa will be just below us within the chats. Please go ahead and say hello, get involved. Let us know why you decided to join today's session. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know your favorite emoji. Share whatever information you feel comfortable with. So in order for you to get involved with today's chat, you would be required to have a YouTube account. Relatively easy to get set up. Once you're all set up, you'll be able to fire over those questions, and we look forward to questions, queries, emojis, thoughts, whichever you can. Go ahead and pop into the chat. We would love to know. And to let you know, this particular live training is part of a broader offering from the Google Digital Garage. So I hugely encourage you to click in the link in the description below. It'll take you to the website and give you an absolute plethora of information, online courses, and many, many more live webinars very similar to this one. Just before we kick off, just to let you know that there is a closed captions option. In other words, you can get the subtitles for today's session. All you need to do is go over to the settings within the video and tap on to CC, and you'll be able to follow along with those subtitles as we start to move through today's session. But now that we've done the housekeeping tips, let's go ahead and jump into what we'll be covering over the next 15 minutes or so, which is going to be number one. We're going to look at how we can understand the impact of great graphics. And I think before we look at creating eye-catching presentations, it's very, very important that we understand the importance of using graphics within these presentations to bring it to life and hopefully articulate certain messages or information in a more efficient way. Then we'll jump into the last part, which is learning top tips for making your presentations pop, because that's what we want to do. We're looking to communicate something, and I'm pretty sure you are all looking to communicate something effectively. With that being said, throughout the course of today's session, pop in any questions or any queries, but without further ado, let's jump into the first part, which is understanding the impact of great graphics. Now, the importance of having great graphics, let's put this in perspective. I'm actually going to put a graphic on screen right now, which may potentially elicit a few emotions. But to give you a little bit more information on this particular statistic, when people hear information, so when they hear it, they're likely to remember only 10% of that information 3 days later. So if somebody hears something, it's likely that they'll only understand or remember 10% of that information 3 days later. However, if a relevant image is paired with that same information, people retained 65% of that information 3 days later. So incredibly important and a very valuable lesson to learn when it comes to putting these messages forward. How can we use an image to really elicit emotions and really bring that message that we're looking to bring across during those presentations? So why do we need to use graphics? Well, so when we're thinking about the world around you, every day we are filled with symbols and graphics and icons to help us understand what to do. For example, if you go into the street, you'll see street signs. If you want to find a bathroom, you'll look for a bathroom sign. Even if you're cooking, you're looking for cooking instructions on how to microwave your popcorn, which hopefully we're all familiar with. You will have images on that impact to guide you through that process. Images facilitate understanding. They help overcome language barriers and help improve retention of that information. And that's essentially what we're looking to do when we are presenting to individuals. So we're really, really hoping that after today's session, within these 15 minutes, you're going to capture a few things that will allow you to integrate within your own presentations and make it really, really stand out. So today we're going to explore a few tips and rules for creating graphics to excite your audience and hold their attention. So why do we need to use graphics? Tell a story, make it memorable, and represent difficult concepts. Now we understand the importance of great graphics. Let's jump into top tips to make your presentations pop. Now, that's really what you came here for today. Hopefully, that's why you signed up, because that's I suppose, the title of the workshop itself. The session is how do we create those eye-catching presentations? Well, we're going to jump into a couple of examples, and hopefully we'll be able to articulate the differences between the two. Let's have a look at the first objective, I suppose, the first approach. When we are presenting and we are creating these presentations, a lot of those presentations are going to have words, and they're going to entail headings and perhaps some subtitles and perhaps the body text of the actual presentation itself. But when it comes to fonts, the first thing that people will look at is the words itself. So it's very, very easy for people to draw their attention away if it's a little bit confusing. So we have an example on the far left-hand side, which is all one font. However, they've changed the size of the font. And you may notice on the far right-hand side, you'll also be able to have this font, but we as individuals find complex fonts will take longer to interpret what the actual meaning is or what the actual word is. Now, this little change in, I suppose, approach to looking at these presentations is these small little changes in the sale. For example, the word sale on the far right-hand side, well, we only interpret that a little bit slower to the one that we see on the left-hand side, which it all coincides with each other, which is mid-year sale. Simply, that's what it is. The one on the far right is a little bit confusing. And the moment we get confused, we're not quite sure where to go. We see a wonderful hello from Kimberly. Hello to you, Kimberly. Hello from you calling from Muscat, Oman. Let us know if you have any questions, but thanks so much for getting involved in today's chat. Let us know if we can help you in any way, or if you have any questions, but a big welcome to yourself, Kimberly. Then we'll jump into the next point. So what we've spoken about first is when it comes to font, it's going to be the main part of your presentation, but keep it simple. Try to use one font, perhaps two fonts, and then just change the sizing, or perhaps make it bold, or perhaps make it the standard or medium, but we alternate the size of the actual words itself, but we don't have 5 different fonts because it can be quite distracting. Next up, we're going to think about the colors. First and foremost, the presentation with the fonts, very, very important. But now, how do we use colors to make sure that this information is communicated effectively? The next guideline really comes around great graphics is limiting the color palette. So no more than 3 primary colors. Initially, you'll like to have one color, which is going to be the highlight color. You have another secondary color, and then you have a neutral color. But what you will see on this particular pie graph is that the pie graph on the left-hand side is quite consistent. And you'll see on the far right-hand side, there's multiple colors, but there is no meaning behind the change of that color. So if there's no meaning behind the change of the color, why do we change that color? Why would we want to confuse your audience when you're delivering these presentations? So you can see that they draw their attention to the key information by creating consistency in the first one, which is on the one on the far left-hand side, and your audience will come to understand the meaning and be able to pick out the important information quickly. And that's what we want your audience to do, is pick up that information quickly. We look on the left-hand side, our monthly income. Okay, well, we got 2 amounts at every single, for 3 of them. And that's a little bit more consistent opposed to different colors on the other side. So to summarize this one, essentially 3 colors, a highlight color, a secondary color, and a neutral color. Try to limit it to those 3 colors, and your presentation overall will have a lot more consistency to it. Next up, we have something a little bit more in terms of hierarchy. If you look at the second image, you would not probably be able to tell myself or Tessa which is the most popular coffee if you had to look at the image on the right. Probably not, because they are all the same size with the same font. However, the first image clearly illustrates that the leader is the Americano. That is one of their best top sellers. And this is when it comes down to the hierarchy in both the images and the fonts. Essentially, to highlight the most popular drink, they've just made that drink a little bit bigger, and they made it the font a little bit bigger too, which allows it to stand out. So by using hierarchy, it'll communicate a message without you having to say it. Let's say, for example, we presented our best sellers. Well, okay, so cappuccino, Americano, and mocha is all your best sellers. Well, instead of us saying 1, 2, 3, all we need to do is enlarge the bestseller, and that will stand out from the best and stand out the most, should we say. So when it comes to the fonts and text, it's a good idea to generally follow the rule that headings are the largest and the subtitles and the body text will follow shortly after. When it comes to colors, use the brightest colors to draw the attention with the most important information. Now, in order to articulate information a little bit more constructively, I'm going to give you a few other examples. So when we are using presentations, we have something what we call a visual aid. When it comes to a visual aid, we're often presenting using the information that we want to understand, pretty complex information what we're trying to communicate. Using visual representations of that info can improve understanding and retention. To give an example, there could be pie graphs. Let's try that again. So bar graphs or pie graphs, these are best for people to help understand the comparison of data. So 60% of people, so I suppose 90% of people loved this particular training, and 10% people said they maybe could have learned something else somewhere else. So when it comes to data and pie graphs, it's quite easy. But what you will see on screen right now is there is an actual map with a few target points. Now, without you actually having to articulate that information, you would understand that it is an international company that has stores in multiple areas without actually having to communicate that or having to list it. Now, we do have the list on the left-hand side, but if we had the image on the right-hand side, the image would be quite easy to understand. Then we have diagrams like maps, and Venn diagrams are great for explaining themes, but then we also have photos, and we've actually used a photo in today's presentation, and the human faces are great for eliciting emotions, and the photos can be a great way for you to show change over time or reference to specific people. You don't want your audience to scratch their head and want to think, aha, you want them to understand, okay, that makes sense. So a couple more examples we have when designing. Now, I'm very, very fortunate that I completed a certificate within the Google Career Certificates called UI UX Design, and you'll learn more about this. If you want to learn more about that, make sure you jump into Google, type in Google Career Certificates, and the UX Design course will help you learn more about this hierarchy and the placements and the colors and the typography are basically going to be the words. So one way to consider your accessibility for your presentation is to think about how can we make it inclusive. Color vision deficiency, also known as CVD, is the best way to describe someone who has a difficulty seeing color. And with each person, that might experience differently. There are lots of things that they may interpret differently from others. If you look at the first example on the screen, let's imagine you're trying to illustrate a message that is communicated, welcome to our presentation. It's very clear. It's on a white background. However, the second one is a little bit confusing. We have a contrast between white and blue on white. Again, some people with that CVD, color visual deficiency, may potentially not be able to read that. And then let's look at the second example. Let's imagine you're trying to illustrate what a message has been sent or delivered. Which design do you think would be more accessible to someone with CVD? If you thought the first one, you are correct. The design here was to use contrasting colors as well as slightly different design. So even with someone who struggles to differentiate with colors, can really catch the meaning. And finally, let's chat about the font size. Remember, using big fonts where possible, not only do people vary their eyesight and strengths, but people also will think about how hard it would be to read the smaller fonts. So again, making sure we're accessible, making sure we are inclusive as much as possible. But now we're going to hand it all over to you. How can you make your graphics stand out in your next presentation? Do make sure you take all these tips on board, and hopefully you will have some really successful presentations in the future. But I'd like to say a big, big thank you to Kimberly for stopping by to learning more about eye-catching presentations. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to Tessa for moderating today's chat. But that's our time up. 15 minutes are already up. Make sure you click in the link in the description below if you'd like to join more sessions. But without further ado, look after yourself, look after each other. And I would say bye for now, everyone.